Okay, so let's proceed with creating the middleware. So we're finished with this. Set the user context, get the user context. Okay, so middleware, here we go. Let's add our middleware. Okay, so down here. Let's start. And the first thing we need to do is to give our middleware a name. And so I will give the name. So let's say authentication middleware. Okay, so func app on application, and let's just give it the name Authenticate. Okay, and of course it's our middleware, so we need to know which of the handlers we will need to call next from our middleware, right? Because remember, if you think about it, our middleware is in the middle. It simply forwards along the request after doing whatever changes it needs to do. So it will accept a handler, and of course it will return one. Okay, so let's create our middleware. So we will simply return, right, and this is nothing new. We will return http dot handler func, right? And so handler func, of course, requires a function, a handler func. So let's just create a handler. Let's call it func. Okay. And of course, it has our response writer, and it has our request, and we have that here. So let's bring this up to here. Okay, it looks nice. It's always a problem when you have to format it, but we did it. So let's actually write the code. So the first thing I need to do is to add a vary authorization. Okay. Header, okay, to the response. Okay, and so this is just a note to caches, okay, that the response may vary. Okay, so we don't want to be caching all responses because our responses can change, and so we're just making a note of that to the browser. Okay, so let's actually do that. So I'm going to say w, that header of course, and I'm going to add, vary as the key, and then of course the value will simply be authorization. Okay, so this is just a heads up to our browser about caching. Okay, so the next step, well, let's just retrieve the value of the authorization header. Okay, from the request. So we expect that the client will include the token that we provided to them. Okay, So that's what we are checking for. So let's just say authorization header will be what we get from our header that gets, and what value do we want to get? We want to get the value corresponding to authorization. Okay. If there is no such value corresponding to this authorization key, then it will return an empty string. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, if no authorization found, then we will create an anonymous user. So if there is no authentication credential or token being sent in this request by the client, then we will say that, okay, this client is not registered, and so they are just an anonymous user. And so we'll just simply say if authorization header is not found, then we will just assume that it's a anonymous user. And so we'll just say app.set user. Right? So notice now we're going to set the user, and we're going to set the user to be of anonymous type. Okay, and that's it. So we now know we're dealing with an anonymous user, and then that's all we need to do. All right. So next, serve HTTP WR, and then we're done. Okay. Now, if it turns out that we do find an authorization header, then it means we're potentially dealing with a registered user. So we need to actually check to see if the authorization header is in the right format. And then later on, we have to then check to see if it's the right token. Okay, so let's check if they provided authorization header is in the right format. Okay, well, let's just do that. So I'm going to say header parts. Okay, and I will just split on the empty space. So I'm going to say strings.split, and I want to split authorization header, but I will use the blank as the way to split. All right. And so once we have the header parts returned to us, we can then check to see if actually it is of the right format. Okay. So keep in mind that the authorization header will be authorization : followed by bearer followed by the token. Okay, so we look at what that looks like in a few. So I want to ensure that the slice returned to us, right? After it slices it up, we want to ensure that the length is 2. So if the length of header parts is not 2, then know that it's not in the right format. Or if the header parts 0 is not the word bearer, it's not in the right format because the client has to provide this word. bearer, then a space, and then the token. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Good. So if this is not the case, okay, this is, oh, size to a string, so let me close that and remove that. Okay, good. All right. So if the length is not 2, or if the first part doesn't have the word bearer, we know that we have a malformed authentication header. And so I will simply say up that invalid authentication token response. So invalid authentication token response. And yes, we have not written this one as yet. So later on, we'll jump into errors and we will add this to errors. And so we'll simply return, right? So malformed authorization header. Now, if we get past this, it means that the authorization header is well formed, but of course, it might not be a correct or valid token. So let's extract the token. Okay. So notice it's a step-by-step process, right? Okay. So, okay, I got to see if length header not equals to 2 or header parse not equals to bearer. Do this. All right. We'll come back to that. So let's grab token and let's get the token, which is in part 1. Okay, good. So what I need to do now is to validate that token. All right, so validate the token. Again, this is nothing new. We've seen this many times. Okay, so if well, actually I need to create a validator. So validator, capital V, not small v. Validator dot new. Okay, I guess it's small v dot new. Yeah, it's small. Okay, so I've got that, and so now let's just call the validation. So if data that validate plain token, plain text token, and then I pass in the token. All right, if that is not valid, so not v.valid, then I know something went wrong, and so I will simply return up that invalid, this one here. Okay, so we'll just send back this invalid authentication token response, and then of course there's nothing we can do, and so we will leave. Okay, now assuming that the validation checks out and we do have a valid token, we will try to retrieve, right? We'll try to retrieve details about the user. Okay, so we're going to say user, and we're going to have error, and then of course we will say app that models that users that get for token, right? And so of course we need to provide data that, and then we'll use scope authentication, right? And then of course we will pass in the token. Okay, so once we do that, then we should get back a user. Of course, if we don't get back a user, then we know something went wrong. So if error not nil, then probably the user doesn't exist, meaning the wrong token, or something went wrong on the server. So let's check to see which one it is. So we'll just use a case and we'll check for no row found. So error and data dot error record not found. If that's the case, then we will again say app that invalid authentication token. Okay. And of course, if that's not the case, then it means something went wrong with the server. And so that will be our default. And then we'll say app that server error response. In either case, we can't do anything else, so we will just return. Okay. Now, assuming we get past this, it means that we did get back a valid user. And so if we get back a valid user, then it means that we can add the user information to the request context. Okay, so in essence, we'll be adding the user to the request. So when we send it off to the server or to the right handler, then the handler will know that, oh, it's this user. And so that's easy enough to do. We'll just say app that, and remember we wrote a method to do this, context set user. Okay, and so if you recall, we need to provide the request and we need to provide the user. The request is just R and the user is the user we just got. Okay, once we have done that, then it means we can send the request on its way. Our middleware has done its job. So call the next handler in the chain. Okay, and so we will simply say next that serve HTTP, and then we will pass W and we will pass the new updated R. Okay, and that takes care of our handler. Okay, everything looks okay. The only thing we need to do is to implement this invalid activation token response method. So I'll leave this here for now, and when we come back we will implement this response method. I'll see you then.